blue tape is the tape that the forensic lab uses to seal the evidence once we've examined the items.
So Exhibit 256, does this appear to be a true and accurate representation of when you last saw this specific evidence?
Yes, it does.
All right. And were you the one who actually did the sealing?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Your Honor, I would move for the admission at this point of State's proposed Exhibit 256.
Any objections?
That's going to remain sealed?
Court's indulgence. Having a conversation.
Yep.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Mr. Johnson, I apologize. This is Exhibit 257. What are we looking at here?
This is a cardboard box containing the other 4 knives or pieces of knives that I was asked to process for latent prints. Again, this bears my signature on the chain of custody, as well as the blue tape where I sealed the box after I was done examining it.
And does that also have the event number ending in 0491?
Yes, it does.
And I believe you said this, but my memory is poor. Is 049, is that a unique event number?
Yes.
Okay. So every case, every phone call that comes into Metro gets a specific, unique last 4 digits?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And this is a true and accurate representation of the way that you last saw this box?
Yes, it is.
And I move for the admission of State's proposed Exhibit 257.
Any objections?
No objection.
It's admitted.
While I've got you here, and this evidence here, on 256 and 257, there are signatures down here towards the bottom. One of those signatures is yours, correct?
Yes, it is.
One on each item?
Yes.
Okay. And then above that is other signatures. Do you recognize the signatures above that?
That's the signature of another forensic scientist in the laboratory. Her name is Jessica Avecedo. It's got her name signature as well as her P number or her personnel identification number on those signatures.
All right. So you obviously opened up these items at one point.
Yes, I did.
And what did you do once you opened up these items?
Well, when I get any items of evidence and I open them up, the first thing that I do is conduct an inventory of the package to make sure that what says is on the outside of the package is actually on the inside. Then I do a visual exam of the items to see if I'm able to see any possible latent prints at that time. Then for this type of evidence, which is non-porous or doesn't absorb water, I'm going to treat that with cyanoacrylate or superglue. So we heat up the superglue goes into this chamber, and then the superglue will actually stick to any fingerprint residue that might be on the surface, kind of developing those latent prints so that I'm able to see them.
All right.
So I did that in this case, and then followed that up with a fluorescent dye stain that dyes the superglue that's on the items, again, just trying to enhance any latent prints that might be on the object.
And all that is for the purpose of making potential comparisons?
Yes.
Okay. In this particular case, I believe you examined lab item number 3, impound item number 1.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And you recall what that was?
If I could refer to my report.
If that would refresh your recollection, please do so.
And you're looking at lab item number 3?
Lab item 3, impound item 1.
Yes. That was a knife blade. So just the blade portion to like a normal kitchen steak knife type knife.
Oh. And you said there was no handle on that one?
No, there was not.
Okay. In that particular case, were you able to develop any suitable latent prints?
I was not able to develop any latent prints on that item.
And what is that, in your records here, no suitable latent prints, what does that mean? Can you describe what that would mean?
So you can touch an item and you can leave behind little parts and pieces, little lines, little ridges, but you need enough of that information in order to conduct a comparison. You need, approximately a dime size of a fingerprint in order to be able to compare that to someone in order to reach a reliable conclusion. So in this case, there just wasn't enough ridge detail that was there that I could compare and then form any sort of reliable conclusion about.
Okay. Item number 4, impound item number 2, described as a serrated paring style kitchen knife with a black handle. Did you analyze that?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to identify or develop any latent prints?
I was not able to develop any latent prints on that item either.
All right. And for similar reasons as discussed before?
Yes.
All right. Referring to item 5, impound item number 3. This is identified as a paring style kitchen knife with a black handle. Were you able to develop any latent prints from that?
No, I was not.
Item 6, impound item number 4, described as a Santoku style kitchen knife with a black handle. Were you able to develop prints from that?
No, I was not.
Item 7, impound item number 5, is a black handled kitchen knife. Were you able to develop prints from there?
No, I was not.
Item 8, impound item number 6, a black handle from a kitchen knife. Can you describe to us what this was?
So this was just the handle portion of a kitchen knife. It didn't have a blade attached to it.
And were you able to develop any latent prints from that item?
No, I was not.
And you had discussed once why you were unable to do so with the first item we discussed. Was why were you unable to identify latent prints on any of these items?
Similar reasons, partially because it's not uncommon not to develop latent prints on items that we process. The types of surfaces that were there, the handle of the blades are a textured plastic, so that makes it a little bit harder to develop latent prints on them. And there just weren't any areas of ridge detail that were going to be enough to conduct a reliable comparison and come to a reliable conclusion on them.
And just to leave no stone unturned, how would the textured plastic handles, how would that affect your ability to develop prints?
If a texture is smooth, then just like when you touch it with a stamp, then it's going to leave a nice impression of your finger. If the surface is textured, then that textured background interferes with the detail or those ridges, those lines, and so we're not necessarily able to get a clear impression from a textured surface as we might from a smooth surface.
In this case, you were unable to make any identification of any sort of prints.
Correct.
Your Honor, I'll pass the witness.
Cross.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. So, just to be specific about this, you had a clear and reliable sample of Mr. Copenhaver's prints to compare to anything you might have found on, I think it was the 5 or 6 items of evidence you examined?
I don't believe I even recovered or obtained the known prints of the person I was requested, Mr. Copenhaver.
Oh, you didn't even get that far because you didn't find anything?
Correct.
Okay. This being Las Vegas, the land of the original CSI, I would say there's a misimpression about how often prints are left.
I would say that's fair.
I think people expect them to be on every item, just about. You can find a print anywhere. It's on the door handle, and they're going to be, all over everything.
I'm sorry, is that a question?
It is. People expect you to find them just about everywhere.
They can, yes.
Okay. And let's go to the knives, the blades and the handles. Those are what you would refer to as smooth surfaces.
The blades themselves are smooth surfaces. I would say that the handles were a slightly textured plastic, yes.
But yet still not so textured that you wouldn't expect to never be able to find a print on them, correct?
Correct.
All right. And this isn't the kind of thing like on TV where you take a picture of something and run it through like what they say is APHIS, and all of a sudden it spits out a print and it says this is the guy.
I was not able to recover any latent prints, so I didn't have anything to put into APHIS or the automated fingerprint identification system.
So no affirmative evidence from you in terms of prints?
No, sir.
And that's why you send it to DNA afterwards? So
DNA had it before.
DNA had it before you. Okay, thank you.
Any redirect?
Briefly. The fact that, as you saw the evidence there was I believe you said Jessica Avecedo had previously looked at the evidence, correct?
Correct.
And what detail is she in?
She works in the DNA detail.
Okay. And so she would have examined the evidence first?
Yes, she did in this case.
Okay. Would her analysis on the items affect your ability to identify any latent prints?
It could. Like I said, what happens to the surface before I get it is going to affect my ability to recover latent prints. In the case of DNA analysis, the common method to recover DNA is to use a swab and swab the surface to recover DNA from the surface. So had she swabbed some of the textured areas or some of the other areas of the knife, that would impair my ability to recover latent prints. This is entirely common. Generally, the details will share evidence and share different parts of the evidence in order that we overall have the best chance of recovering either DNA or latent prints from that item of evidence.
As it related to the handles specifically, were you necessarily surprised that you were unsuccessful in recovering latent prints?
No, I wasn't.
I'll pass the witness.
Any further across?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Next.
State calls Jessica Avecedo.
Good, follow. Good, step up into the box. Can you place your items down, remain standing? And then raise your right hand, face that gentleman right there.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Please state your complete name, spelling both your first and last name for the record.
My name is Jessica Avecedo. It's Jessica. Last name is Acevedo.
Thank you.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Acevedo. How are you employed?
I'm employed with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Forensic Lab.
And what is your position within the lab?
I'm a forensic scientist too in the biology DNA detail.
And how long have you been working in that position?
I've been there since July of 2011 in DNA.
And what did you do before that?
I was hired with Metro actually in December of 2008, and before that I was a forensic lab aide, and then I promoted to DNA in July of 2011.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can you explain your training and education to the jury that allows you to obtain that position?
Yes, I obtained a Bachelor's of Science degree with a major in biology and a minor in chemistry from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I also had to complete an extensive, well-documented training program with the Las Vegas Forensic Lab. It lasted about a year and a half. During that time, I had to do written assessments, shadow senior scientists, test mock samples. I also had to complete a competency test and 50 supervised cases before being released into independent casework.
Have you previously testified as an expert in regards to the field of DNA here in the 8th Judicial District Court?
I have, yes.
Now, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Lab that you previously discussed where you work, is that what is referred to as an accredited lab?
Yes, we're accredited.
What does that mean?
So we're accredited by ASCAD Lab, which stands for the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board. Accreditation is a voluntary program that any crime lab can participate to show that its management, operations, personnel meet established standards. It ensures we're producing quality work.
I want to talk in a moment about how it is that you conduct the testing. But after you are done with the testing, is your work, your results you're finding, is that reviewed by others?
Yes, my entire case is reviewed by 2 separate qualified DNA analysts. The first review is a technical review by 1 analyst, and then the second is an administrative review by a separate analyst.
Okay, so DNA is something we hear a lot more these days after shows like CSI, NCIS, etc. But can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what it is?
So DNA is the genetic material in all living organisms. It's located in our cells. It's responsible for passing down information from one generation to the next. DNA is determined at conception, and it stays the same throughout our lifetime. We get half of our DNA from our mom and the other half from our dad. And DNA is also the same throughout our body. So the DNA that's in my hair is the same DNA that's in my skin cells and blood. The DNA that I'm looking for is also unique to each individual, except for identical siblings, like identical twins, triplets, stuff like that.
So those are the only type of individuals in the whole world that would have the exact same DNA?
Yes, besides that, every other person's profile is unique.
Okay. Now, are there certain surfaces that are more conducive that someone would be able to leave DNA on them? Does that question make sense?
Yes, so rough or textured surfaces tend to gather skin cells better and retain them better than a smooth surface would.
Now, are there different types of DNA, for instance? Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the difference is between touch DNA and then the other type of DNA, like from body fluids?
Okay, so body fluids are a rich source of DNA, like blood, semen, saliva. They contain a lot of DNA. Touch DNA is DNA referred to when an item is touched or handled, and that's usually from the transfer of skin cells. Those are the 2 types of DNA.
Okay, so for instance, if I were to touch this desk and maybe kind of rub my hand down it, I would be leaving perhaps touch DNA. Would that be fair?
Yes, there's variables to touch DNA, but if I was to swab that surface and do DNA analysis, it could be potential that I would obtain your DNA profile.
Okay. Now, if I were to lick this table, which would be weird, but if I were to do that, would the saliva that I left increase your chances of being able to recover DNA because body fluids contain such a rich source of DNA?
Yes, that would be true.
Okay. So when we talk about body fluids that are a rich source of DNA, does that include blood?
Yes.
We already talked about we already talked about saliva.
Yes.
What about semen?
Yes, semen is also rich in DNA.
And then conversely, what about fluids within the vagina?
Yes, vaginal fluids are a good source of DNA as well. They're a rich source of DNA.
Okay. So when we talk about someone getting a buccal swab, so like the police come to you, they want to get your DNA, they will take something that looks like a Q-tip and then rub it inside of your cheek. Would that be correct?
Yes.
So inside of your mouth, is that a rich source of your own DNA?
Yes, the inside lining of your cheek, they have a lot of skin or cells, epithelial cells or buccal cells. So when they swab the lining of someone's cheek, it's a very good part or place in your body to get DNA. So we use those buccal swabs to obtain DNA from certain individuals.
Now, if someone took their finger and stuck it in your mouth,
Okay.
again, weird, but because the source of DNA in your mouth is so strong, would it be likely or unlikely that you would be able to get the person's touch DNA from their finger?
It would be more likely that they would obtain the profile of whoever's mouth it was. The saliva would mask the touch DNA from the finger.
So your own saliva then the DNA within your own saliva would mask the touch DNA by the person who put their finger in your mouth?
Yes.
Okay. Is that same type of analysis the same if a suspect touches someone's vagina where there's vaginal fluid?
Yes, I would expect that the vaginal fluid would mask the touch DNA because the vaginal fluid, like I stated, is a rich source of DNA. So I would say that that's true.
Okay. Now, if someone were to lick their hand and then rub the inside of someone's vagina, and when I say inside, I mean like past the labia majora, would the fluids within the vagina likely mask that type of DNA as well?
I'd say that's a fair statement.
If the female then urinates
Okay.
and then wipes after urinating, does that further decrease your chances of getting any of the DNA from the saliva if you were ever able to get any in the first place?
Yes, that could potentially wipe away the saliva or touch DNA, so that would make it harder to obtain a DNA profile, if at all.
Okay. So in a second, I'm going to ask you some questions about how you do your testing. But before we do that, I kind of want to get some definitions from you because I think we'll be using that terminology during my direct examination of yours. So when I use the term a DNA profile, can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that is?
Sure, a DNA profile is just a set of numbers at 15 locations on the DNA molecule that we test for, and it also includes a 16th marker known as a sex-determining marker, and that allows me to know the gender of the individual, whether it's a male or a female.
Okay, so if you have a DNA molecule, which obviously isn't this big, but I'm just trying to put it kind of in layman's terms. So if you have this DNA molecule, you're saying that you can test it at 15 different locations?
Yes, that's what we do, 15 locations plus the sex-determining marker.
Okay, and when you say you test it at 15 different locations, what do you mean by that? Like, what information does that give you?
So we use something called STR testing, which stands for short tandem repeats. These locations are unique to each individual. So over 99.9% of our DNA is the same. That's why we all look human. It's at less than 1% that makes us unique. And those locations are part of that less than 1%. And that's what I'm looking for, the unique locations of the DNA that make us all different and make our profiles unique to each other.
So if I, left DNA here on this podium and then I left it here over on this chair, would you be able to see the same 15 markers on those molecules?
Yes, the numbers at those locations would be the same if there was the same person touching both areas.
Now, if I touch this podium and you touch that chair, would there obviously then be differences between the 15 markers that you're testing?
Yes.
We talked a little bit about what standard buccal swabs were when we were discussing earlier when I was asking you the questions about the Q-tip going into the cheek. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you some questions in a moment, and you will probably use the term a single source profile and a mixture profile. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what those words mean?
So a single source profile is a profile from just one person. And a mixture profile is a profile from more than one person, two or more people that contributed to that DNA profile.
Okay, and what about a full profile versus a partial profile?
So a full profile means that I obtained comparable quality DNA at all of the 15 locations, and a partial profile means that I didn't obtain DNA at all the 15 locations. It was less than the 15.
Now, before you get started in actually looking for DNA, if there's an area where you believe that possibly blood could be, do you do some type of presumptive testing to see if blood actually exists on the item you're about to test?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can you explain that process to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury and what information it gives you?
Sure. So if I see a reddish-brown staining or I believe the item may contain apparent blood, I would take a sampling of the discoloration and apply chemicals. If you see a pink color change, then you know that that stain or item is possibly contains possible apparent blood. If no color change happens, then the item is negative for blood.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk to you about something that's referred to as chain of custody. So before you came in today, we had a fingerprint analyst come in and discuss kind of event numbers and those types of things, etc. So I'm not going to run through those questions with you. But what I am going to run through is that when an item comes to you to be tested, do you always have to make sure that those items are properly sealed and that the chain of custody hasn't been broken?
Yes, before I start my examination, I make sure that the item is sealed, the person's personnel number, we call it the P number, initials are on there, everything is secured and before I even start my analysis.
Okay, and is that to just show that the integrity of the evidence has not been compromised?
Yes, it is.
And by that, I guess what I mean is that no one has been able to, mess with the evidence or change any of the, DNA on the evidence or fingerprints, etc.
Yes.
So I would like to now turn your attention to some testing that you did, and all of my questions will be related to event number 140808-0491. and a connecting event number of 1408087570. I want to go through your findings in regards to the DNA testing you did specifically in this case. But can you explain the process by which you conduct your testing to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Okay, so first I'll open the item, and I'm going to visually look for any discoloration, and if possible, like if I saw a reddish brown stain, I would take the sampling, do the chemical test like I described earlier. If I saw a color change or not, decide whether it's apparent blood or not. Then I would take a different sampling of the item to obtain a DNA profile and perform DNA analysis on it. DNA profiles to us, after we insert it into our instrumentation, looks like peaks on a graph. So I can take those profiles from the evidence items and compare them to the profiles obtained from the buccal swabs or the reference standards from the people in the case to either include or exclude those people from the items of evidence.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you did receive a request in regards to the event numbers that I referenced earlier. What items did you receive a request to do testing on?
Can I refer to my report?
Yes, and I don't believe that, Mr. Linder, would you have a problem if she refers to a report at any time during her examination?
As long as it's clear on the record.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Right, so just let us know if you're referring to it, but it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So go ahead, please. And if you could just list for me the items that you were requested to do your DNA analysis on associated with those event numbers, please.
Okay, so I received a swab of the north wall of the northeast bedroom above an indentation in the drywall.
Okay?
I also received a swab of a cabinet door below a sink on the second level of the northeast bedroom. I received one serrated knife blade, one Eco Flint knife, a knife with a serrated approximately 3-inch blade and a black handle, a knife with approximately 7-inch blade and a black handle, a knife with a serrated approximately 5 1/4 inch blade and a black handle, one black handle from a knife where the blade was missing, a white t-shirt, a sex assault kit collected from Kristen McKinday, and reference standards from Kristen McKinday, Corey Thomas, and Jonathan Copenhaver.
Okay, now you don't know any of those individuals, correct?
No.
When you do you're a forensic scientist, is that correct?
Yes.
And as a forensic scientist, you don't have any bias or prejudice towards one side or the other.
No, the outcome of the case, I have no stakes in the outcome of the case.
You're a scientist.
Yes.
Okay. So, when you said your reference standards, what you mean by that is we talked about all the items that were collected and that you tested. You then compared that to known DNA samples from Corey Thomas, Christine McInday, and Jonathan Copenhaver. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to now go through your results. You did testing on several items in several areas. So what I would like to start with first is the items where you actually received DNA results on, if you wouldn't mind. And at any time, if you need to look at your report, go ahead and let me know.
Okay.
And Your Honor, I will be using, one second, because I put them out of order so they would work for the annals. These last ones. Sorry, I'm putting all of them. And Your Honor, I've shown these exhibits to defense counsel. They are states proposed 258 through 274, and Mr. Readerman does not have an objection to
That's
those.
correct.
You're admitted, thank you.
Thank you. And permission to publish these, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so the first item that you tested, and the ladies and gentlemen of jury have seen a picture of this, but was from a swab of the north wall of the northeast bedroom above an indentation in the drywall. So it was a picture of like a red stain around an indentation of a wall in Miss McInday's bedroom. Did you test that for blood?
I test the swab For parent blood, yes.
Okay, so a swab was taken of the blood above the indentation, and then you test that swab?
Yes.
Okay. When you
Sorry,
tested...
I apologize for interrupting.
No, I-
Apparently, it only goes through 271, not 274.
That's okay.
Just so we have a clear record. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Continue.
And so I asked if you did test the swab for presumptive blood or for blood, and what were your results?
The swab was positive for parent blood.
Okay. So once you get that finding that it was positive for a parent blood, what's the next step in your process?
So then I took a cutting of the swab, placed it into a labeled tube to perform DNA analysis on it.
And you did that analysis?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
I'm going to refer to my report.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The full DNA profile obtained from the swab of the north wall of the northeast bedroom above the indentation in the drywall is consistent with Jonathan Copenhaver. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual from the general population having a DNA profile that is consistent with the full DNA profile obtained from the evidence sample is approximately 1 in 4.05 quintillion. Corey Thomas and Kristen McInday are excluded as possible contributors to the DNA profile obtained.
Okay, so that's a lot. So
Yes.
we're going to break that down, okay? So let's start with the easy stuff. First of all, you were able to get a DNA profile,
Yes.
and it was a full profile.
Yes, it was.
And you were able to completely exclude that blood or that DNA. It was not Corey Thomas's, and it was not Christine McInerney's.
That's correct.
Okay. Now you use the term, the probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual from the general population having a DNA profile that is consistent with the DNA profile obtained from the evidence sample is approximately 1 in 4.05 quintillion. Okay, so how many zeros is quintillion?
Quintillion is 18 zeros.
How many people are there in the world?
Approximately 7.5 billion.
So this 4.05 quintillion is way more than the entire Earth's population.
Yes, it'd be like millions of Earth's population, like to give you an idea of how large the number is.
Okay, so when you say it's consistent with the DNA profile, and that is approximately 1 in 4.05 quintillion, like what does that mean to the jury?
So you know how we talked about quintillion being such a large number? 1 in that number is such a small probability. And the probability is if I was to randomly pull someone out of the population and have that person's profile match the profile from the evidence, that's the probability, 1 in 4.05 quintillion. And in this case, Jonathan Copenhaver's profile matched all the locations I tested to this item of evidence.
Okay. Now you went on to test, the next thing that you tested was a swab of a cabinet door below the sink in the second level of the northeast bedroom. And you did testing for blood, and that came back positive, is that correct?
Yes, positive for parent blood.
And then after you did the testing for blood, what was the next step in your analysis?
Then I took a cutting of the swab, performed DNA analysis on it, obtained a profile, and compared it to the reference standards in this case.
Okay, and what were your results in regards to, well, first, let me start out by saying, were you able to exclude Corey Thomas and Christine McInerney as possible contributors to that DNA profile?
Yes, I was.
And the DNA profile that you received was a full profile, correct?
Yes.
And it was consistent with Mr. Copenhaver?
Yes.
And the probability in that was 1 in 4.05 quintillion, so the same results?
Yes.
Thank you. Now I'm going to move on, and I have some pictures in regards to some of the next items that you did your testing on. And this is states 258. I believe I already asked permission to publish, Your Honor, but if I didn't, may I?
Go ahead. If they're admitted, you can publish.
Thank you. So this top right here, is this the envelope that this knife blade came in?
Yeah, it came in actually a bigger packaging. This is the inner packaging, so I took a picture of the inner packaging and then both sides of the item.
Okay, and so I'm going to zoom in here. And so the testing that you did on this particular item, this is just the blade of a knife. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you, did you do any testing to see if there was any blood on this?
Yes, I did testing, the chemical test, and there was no apparent blood on this item.
When you swab this, do you do the entire knife or do you do a swabbing of the knife?
Well, due to the fact that I knew that latent prints also needed to test the knife, I saved the sides of the blade for latent prints and only swabbed the top blade area, the tip, and the serrated blade edge with one swab to perform DNA analysis on.
Okay, so if we look at the monitor, you would have swabbed above on this sharp edge right here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, sorry.
It's okay, it's hard to get used to. On the point,
Yes.
and then along the serrated edge.
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain, after you did the swabbing, it had already tested negative for presumptive blood, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, did you still go on to the other steps to see if there was DNA on the knife blade?
Yes.
And when you did that testing, can you please explain your findings for the blade?
Okay, I'm going to reference my report. The DNA profile obtained from the serrated knife blade is consistent with a distinguishable mixture of at least 3 individuals, with at least 1 being male. The major DNA profile obtained is consistent with Kristen McInday. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual from the general population having a DNA profile that is consistent with the major DNA profile obtained from the evidence sample is approximately 1 in 61.9 quintillion. Corey Thomas and Jonathan Copenhaver cannot be excluded as possible contributors to this mixture. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual from the general population who could be included as a possible contributor to the mixture DNA profile obtained from the evidence sample is approximately 1 in 53.
Okay, so let's break that down again if we can. This DNA profile that you were able to obtain was a mixture, meaning there was more than one person.
Yes, it was a mixture of at least 3 people.
Okay. And with at least one of those individuals being male.
Yes.
Now, the major DNA profile, so like the profile that was the biggest, right?
Yes,
Was consistent with Miss McInday.
that's correct.
And that number was 1 in 61.9 quintillion.
Yes, it was.
So that was even much higher than the probability in regards to Mr. Copenhaver's DNA, which was still large, 1 in 4.05 quintillion.
Yes.
But in regards to the DNA found on the serrated knife, the random probability was 1 in 61.9 quintillion.
That's correct.
Now, you stated that Mr. Thomas and Mr. Copenhaver, they couldn't be excluded as possible contributors to this mixture, but the probability in randomly selecting random people would be 1 in 53. So that's not a very random good number, would you say?
I would say it's not a good stat, if that's a good way of saying it, yeah.
So like if 1 in every 53 people in the world could have the DNA consistent with what you found.
Yeah, the probability that someone could be included in the mixture is 1 in 53 people.
Thank you. So the next item that I would like to jump to, if we could, would be lab item number 8, which is states proposed 259. I'm going to zoom out for you. And we're looking at here a handle of a knife that a blade is missing from. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
And in regards to lab item 8, did you test to see if there was any blood on the handle?
Yes, I did.
And what were your results?
It was negative for apparent blood.
Okay. Did you continue on with your DNA testing?
Yes, I took a 1 dam swab and swabbed the whole handle to perform DNA analysis on that item.
And did you do the front of the handle as well as the back?
I did, yes, the whole item.
Okay. And what were your findings?
Referencing my report. The DNA profile obtained from the black handle from a knife with the blade missing is consistent with an indistinguishable mixture of at least 3 individuals, with at least 1 being male. Corey Thomas, Kristen McInday, and Jonathan Copenhaver cannot be excluded as possible contributors to the mixture. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual from the general population who can be included as a possible contributor to the mixture DNA profile obtained from the evidence sample is approximately 1 in 60.
Okay. So the DNA profile that you obtained, again, was a mixture of at least 3 people.
Yes.
And at least one of those 3 individuals was a male.
Yes.
Now, you weren't able to exclude Mr. Thomas, Ms. McInday, or Mr. Copenhaver.
No.
Again, your random selection number was not the best of stats. It was 1 out of every 60 individuals.
That's correct.
I'm going to move on now to lab item 9. And that is shown in states 260. Can you explain what we're looking at here?
This is the white t-shirt. When I first opened the bag, it was wrapped in like brown paper, brown butcher paper.
Okay, and I'm going to show you the front of that picture once it was laid out. I'm showing states 261. Would this be the shirt that was in that evidence package?
Yes.
And that would be the front of the shirt, correct?
Yes, the front.
And now showing you states 262, which would be the back of that same shirt.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you some questions in regards to now item 9.1, which is notated. First, I'm going to show you a picture on the right side of the picture in states 264. And there's a teeny little spot, and I'm going to zoom all the way in. And we see one second, sometimes it needs to autofocus. There we go. We see a circle around a little red dot. And now if I follow that circle, we can see that you referenced that little red droplet right there as 9.1. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's just to show the location of that, the size and location of the droplet on the shirt. Is that fair?
Yeah, when I take a picture, I'm taking a picture of the whole item, showing the location of the stain, and then showing a close-up so you can see the actual stain since it's so small on the item.
Thank you. And so can you, when you did the testing on 9.1, was that positive for presumptive blood?
Yes, it was.
And then did you go on with your testing and do your DNA analysis?
Yes, I took a cutting of the stain, placed it into a label tube, and performed DNA analysis on it.
And what were your findings in relation to 9.1?
Okay, referencing my report.
Thank you.
The full DNA profile obtained from the stain on the front, bottom, left side of the white t-shirt is consistent with Jonathan Copenhaver. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual from the general population having a DNA profile that's consistent with the full DNA profile obtained from the evidence sample is approximately 1 in 4.05 quintillion. And I excluded Corey Thomas and Kristen McInday from this item.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on now to 9.2. And we're going to do the same thing if you don't mind. States 265. I'm going to do showing you the top of the exhibit, which shows the shirt. And again, with that left arrow, with an arrow, we see it circled on the top left shoulder. I'm now going to turn the exhibit sideways so we can see what you're pointing at. So this would be where my pen is now. This would be the collar of the shirt. Is that right?
Yes.
And then to the left of it, we see a droplet, but it's more linear, I guess, than a droplet. This area right here is kind of just a red line. Would that be a fair depiction?
Yes.
Did you do a cutting and swabbing of that area?
Yes, I did a presumptive test for blood, and it was positive for possible blood. And then I did DNA analysis on the cutting as well.
And what were your results for 9.2?
This one was consistent with a distinguishable mixture of at least 3 individuals, with at least 1 being male.
Okay.
The major profile was consistent with Jonathan Copenhaver. The same stat as before, 1 in 4.05 quintillion. And I could exclude Corey Thomas and Kristen McInday from the major, and I could make no conclusions on the minor component.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'm going to show you states 266. We'll zoom out for you, Avecedo. In the bottom part of the shirt, we see a very small circle. And so I'm going to move the exhibit over, zoom in, showing you another droplet, and that's shown as 9.3. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you test 9.3 to see if that was positive for blood?
Yes.
And what were your findings?
Yes, it was positive for possible blood.
And did you continue on with your analysis?
Yes, I took a portion of the stain, performed DNA analysis on it, Would you like the results?
Yes, just let me know. You're referring to your report?
Yes, I'm referring to my report.
Thank you.
The full DNA profile obtained from item 9.3 was consistent with Corey Thomas. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual from the general population having a DNA profile that's consistent with the full DNA profile obtained from the evidence is approximately 1 in 2.56 quintillion. Kristen McInday and Jonathan Copenhaver were excluded on this item.
Okay, so 9.3 was consistent with the DNA of Mr. Thomas, and that random probability is 1 in 2.56 quintillion?
Yes.
Thank you. And now I'm going to pull states 267. I'm going to start with the bottom picture, and I'm going to zoom out for you. We're now looking at the back of the t-shirt. So if we look at the top of the picture, here would be the collar, and then to the right would be the back of the right arm, to the left would be the back of the left arm. Is that fair?
Yes.
Now we see, I'm going to zoom in for you. We see again a red, very light, but we see a red line going across the picture, and then there, if I pull the picture up, we'll see the red droplet. This one's a rather larger droplet than what we've been discussing previously. Did you do testing on this, which you've labeled 9.4?
Yes.
Okay. And when you tested that, was that positive for presumptively positive for blood?
Yes, it was.
Did you continue on with your DNA analysis?
Yes, I did.
And what were your results?
Referencing my report, the profile obtained from the stain on the black upper right shoulder was consistent with a distinguishable mixture of at least 2 individuals, with at least 1 being male. The major profile obtained was consistent with Jonathan Copenhaver, with the RMP statistic of 1 in 4.05 quintillion. Corey Thomas cannot be excluded as a possible contributor to this mixture. The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual and having their profile be included as a contributor would be approximately 1 in 49,500, and Kristen McInday was excluded from this mixture statistic.
Okay, so Mr. Copenhaver's probability was 1 in 4.05 quintillion.
Yes.
And Mr. Thomas's probability was 1 in 49,500.
Yes.
And also the DNA that you pulled from this area, you said it was a mixture profile with at least 2 individuals.
Yes, it was.
Now, when we see the pictures of the shirt, it's clear, that there is what appears to be blood, multiple reddish stains on the front of the shirt, on the back of the shirt. So how is it that you determine, which areas to test and cut from?
It's true. It was had multiple reddish brown stains. So what we do is we take a representative sampling of the area. So as you see, I took 2 from the front bottom, 1 kind of from the top, and then 1 in the back, trying to avoid some of the larger areas to see if I can get multiple people on the item of clothing in this case.
And so, and is that why you don't, like, for instance, we see a huge, I still have up on the screen 267, we see a huge area of blood right here. Why is that area not tested?
Typically, when items of clothing, we're looking for smaller items to try to find different people, or smaller stains, to find different people on the clothing. So we just take a sampling of the item in different locations.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, so I believe looking at everything, we have gone over all of your findings that were positive for DNA at this point. And when I say positive, I mean you were able to get a profile and get a probability.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'd like to go back to the rest of the items that you tested. The next item that we spoke about that was referenced in your report was what was referred to as an echo flint knife, which is lab item 4, which can be seen in states 268. Are these types of knives conducive to leaving DNA? And when I say the knives, I mean the handles. Can you explain that?
Touch DNA is very variable. Sometimes rougher surfaces would be better at containing DNA or keep skin cells. However, touch DNA, like I said, is variable. It's a hit or miss. Sometimes you do get good results and sometimes you don't.
Thank you. So in regards to the testing that you did on this echo flint knife that we're seeing here, which was lab item 4, when we zoom in, it looks like you had circled this, a little kind of brownish area at the bottom part of the serrated section of the knife. What type of testing did you do there?
I tested it for possible blood.
And what were the findings?
Referencing my report, this is the echo flint.
Yes.
It was negative for possible blood.
Okay. Now, did you swab the handle as well as the tip and the blade in regards to this knife?
Yes, one swab I used for the blade edges and the tip, and then a different swab I used for the entire handle.
Okay. And were you able, what were your results?
Okay, referencing my report for the flint knife.
Thank you.
For the flint, the Echo Flint knife handle, it was consistent with the indistinguishable mixture of at least 2 individuals, but due to the limited data available, no conclusions can be made regarding the partial mixture DNA profile.
Okay.
And then for the tip and blade edges, a DNA profile wasn't obtained at all.
Okay, so you weren't able to make any findings in regards to that, in regards to the probabilities or who, if anyone's DNA was in?
No, I was not.
Moving on to lab item 5, which can be seen in states 269. Let me zoom out for you. This, you referenced this as a knife with serrated approximately 3-inch blade and black handle. And in this, did you swab both the handle as well as the tip and blade edges of the blade part of the knife?
Yes.
And can you explain your findings, if any, in regards to this?
Referencing my report for
Yes.
item 5, for the handle, I got a partial DNA profile obtained from the swabbing of the handle. It was consistent with the indistinguishable mixture of at least 2 individuals. Due to the limited data available, no conclusions can be made regarding this partial mixture DNA profile.
Okay.
And then for the tip and blade edges, I did not obtain a DNA profile.
All right, so for the handle portion of it, you were able to get a mixture profile showing at least 2 individuals,
Yes.
and one of those was male.
Yes,
But you weren't able to decipher whose DNA it was.
that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now moving on to lab item 6, which is a larger knife than the others that we've been dealing with. And for the record, Your Honor, I don't believe I said it, it states 270.
Thank you.
You're welcome. In regards to the swabbing that you did of this, was that both, again, on the swabbing of both sides of the handle as well as the tip and the blade edges?
Yes, it was.
And what were your findings in regards to this knife?
Referencing my report,
Thank you.
the DNA profile obtained from the swabbing of the approximately 7-inch blade knife handle, it was consistent with the indistinguishable mixture of at least 2 individuals, with at least one being male, but due to the limited data available, no conclusions could be made regarding the mixture DNA profile.
Okay.
And then for the knife tip and blade edges, I did not obtain a DNA profile.
Okay, so again, same thing as the one before in regards to the handle. At least 2 people there,
Yes,
and at least one of those is a male,
yes,
but you can't tell who it is.
yes.
All right. And then lastly, I'm going to show you, as far as pictures go, states 271, which would be another knife. Did you do the same type of swabbing? And when I say that, I'm referring to the blade, the handle on both sides,
Yes,
and as well as the swabbing around the edges and the tip of the blade in and of itself.
yes, I did.
And on these, what were your results, if any, in regards to those?
Referencing my report, item 7.1, the swabbing from the knife handle, it was consistent with the indistinguishable mixture of at least 3 individuals, with at least one being male. Due to the limited data, no conclusions could be made regarding this mixture DNA profile. And then for the knife tip and blade edges, it was consistent with the indistinguishable mixture of at least 1 individual, with at least one being male. But due to the limited data, no conclusions can be made regarding this mixture or partial mixture DNA profile.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for not asking you this, but with each of these knives that you were unable to determine whose DNA it was, you also tested them for blood and they came back as negative.
Yes, the only knife I didn't test for blood, referencing my report, was item 3, and that's because there was no discoloration, so there was really nothing for me to test on that one.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Lastly, I'd like to talk to you about the DNA testing that you conducted on a sexual assault kit that was taken of Christine McInday at Sunrise Hospital. Did you do DNA analysis on several items that were a part of the sexual assault kit?
Yes, I did.
And can you give us the list of those items that you conducted your testing on, please?
Yes, referencing my report, the items contained in the sex assault kit were vaginal swabs, external genitalia swabs, rectal swabs, oral swabs, inner thigh swabs, a right hand fingernail swab, and a left hand fingernail swab, and then a reference standard from Christine McInday.
Okay. When you do DNA analysis on items like this that are part of a sexual assault kit, is part of your testing process to see if there is semen or sperm on these items?
Yes.
And you checked to see if there was semen or sperm on the internal and external vaginal swabs, is that correct?
Yes.
And there was not any semen or sperm?
No.
As well as the rectal swabs, the oral swabs, and the inner thigh swabs, again, semen negative and sperm negative, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, in regards to your findings of DNA in all of the swabs that you took from the sexual assault kit, all of that DNA was consistent with Miss McInday.
That's correct.
Is that surprising to you that Miss McInday's DNA would be a part of her own sexual assault kit?
No, it's not surprising.
For instance, when the swabs were taken of her vagina, it probably is common sense, but obviously her DNA would be on her own vaginal swabs.
That's correct.
If someone were to have licked their hand, and we talked about this hypothetically earlier, but in Ms. McInday's case, if a suspect were to have licked his hand and then rubbed the inside of her vagina past her labia majora, would you expect to see the suspect's DNA would you expect the suspect's DNA to be masked by Ms. McInday's DNA?
Yes, it's possible, since I talked about how vaginal fluids are such a rich source of DNA, that it's possible that the saliva could have been masked by the vaginal fluid.
Okay. If Ms. McInday has urinated since the incident, can urine sometimes flush out less richer sources of DNA?
It could wash away some of the DNA, that's possible.
And then also if Ms. McInday were to then wipe after urinating with the toilet paper, does that also further your chances of being able to get the DNA from any saliva?
Yes, that's possible too.
So with each of those actions, the one action being Ms. McInday's, the richness of her own vaginal fluid, and then the effect of her urinating, and then the effect of her wiping her vagina, in each of those instances, do your chances of being able to recover any DNA from the saliva greatly deteriorate?
Yes, I could say that's a fair statement.
Court's indulgence, Your Honor. Thank you so much. That concludes my direct examination, Your Honor. I'll pass the witness.
Thank you. Ross?
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Doesn't appear that state's 28 has been admitted. I would offer it.
Oh, thank you. No opposition, Your Honor.
28 submitted?
Thank you. Have you seen any photos of where evidence was collected from?
Not in this case.
This is the first time you're looking at a photo like this?
Yes.
Do you have something in your notes that describes a contribution from above a dent in the wall?
Yes, I received a swab from above an indentation in the drywall.
Okay. And what lab item is that?
Referencing my report, That item, indentation, it's impound item 7, or lab item 1.
Oh, okay. And were you able to, let me give you a, also not admitted, 23?
No objection.
23?
23.
Okay, 23 is admitted as well.
Let me give you a close-up of that. That consistent with lab item 1?
I just obtained the swab, but yes, it was a swab from an indentation, above an indentation in the wall.
Okay. And what, if anything, were you able to determine about that indentation?
I'm going to reference my report. It was positive for possible blood, and I obtained a profile that was consistent with Jonathan Copenhaver.
And what was the probability that it was Mr. Copenhaver's?
The probability, it was a random match probability. As I stated earlier, we explained that. It was 1 in 4.05 quintillion.
Meaning significantly more than the population of Earth.
It's a theoretical population,
I
but
understand.
yes.
And then previously admitted 568. Did you receive a sample from where I'm pointing, a corner of a nightstand?
No, I don't believe so. I have a swab from a cabinet door below a sink on the second level of the northeast bedroom. Those are the only 2 swabs from a scene I got.
So you're saying this was not collected, the blood on the corner there?
I don't know if it was collected, but I didn't receive it. It wasn't requested for me to work.
Okay, going back to the shirt. Okay, this is 262, which has just been admitted. So, good deal of blood on the shirt, correct?
Possible blood, yes.
Possible blood. What would look to you in your training and experience as blood?
Yes.
How many different areas did you sample? I don't recall.
I believe, I'm going to reference my report, 4.
4. Okay, did one of them come from this large stain of blood?
No.
Did one of them come from this large stain of blood?
No.
This large stain of blood?
No.
On this side, what did, this is 266. What did you take from around the collar?
1, it was 9.3 on the upper right shoulder, the stain or sample I took from the top.
And I'm sorry, you said it was 9.5?
9.3.
9.3.
Oh, excuse me, I think it's, sorry, 9.2. Front upper left shoulder, sorry.
And that was consistent with,
I'm going to reference my report. 9.2 was consistent with Jonathan Copenhaver.
alrighty. And do you do enough scene work, or have you seen enough scene pictures to know whether the blood on the top of a shirt would be consistent with a head hitting here and blood coming down?
That's,
You don't know?
no.
All right. Next witness. With respect to saliva being placed on the vaginal area, that could stay for days or even weeks without cleaning?
Saliva on a vaginal. Yeah, it depends on like the activity, what happened after the alleged incident. That it would depend on that. It was maybe a dead lady. It might stay because she's not doing any activity, you know, stuff like that.
When you say things like excluded as possible contributors, does that correlate to some of the ratios you've described, like when you exclude something as a possible contributor? Are you certain to like, 1 in 4.05 quintillion or something like that?
When we exclude someone, what we do is we look at the evidence profile, we make our conclusions and interpret it, and then we look at our reference profiles to see if they are consistent or if they're included. If their DNA types don't match, they're considered excluded.
Okay. With a certainty.
We don't use a statistic for exclusions, only for inclusions or matches.
All right, and in terms of the determination of male versus female, that's based, I think you said that's based on the 13th allele?
No, it's called an amylogenin. We call it the 16th thing. It's a sex determining marker. It's called amylogenin. So females have an XX and males have an XY. If I have a peak at a Y, I can say that a male is present in that profile.
And when you say an indistinguishable mixture of at least two individuals, how do you get to that conclusion?
So indistinguishable, what it means is that I couldn't pull out a major profile. There was no person that gave the majority of that profile. And then, you know how I talked about having half of your DNA from your mom, half from your dad, and DNA being peaks on a graph? If there's more than 2 peaks at a location, then it's considered a mixture. So I would count the number of peaks. It's a little bit more detailed now, but basically to see how many people could be included in that, how many people could contribute to that mixture, and that's how I get the number of people. And then indistinguishable, like I said before, just means there was no major in that profile.
And in reference to the T-shirt that's still up on the screen, if I heard you correctly in direct, you found 4 profiles, 3 of which were John Copenhaver?
Some were full, like single source profiles, and some were mixture profiles. The major, though, on 1 was consistent with Jonathan Copenhaver, and 2 were consistent with Jonathan Copenhaver only.
And on this shirt, you're excluded as a possible contributor, Christine McInday?
Yes, and all the samplings I took, she was excluded. Can I reference my report just to make double sure on one?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, please, if it would help refresh your recollection.
Yes, I'm just making sure. Yes, she was excluded from all the items.
Okay. It's been a little while since I've done this with DNA, but you said you used STR testing?
Yes.
Okay, there's another type that at least used to be commonly used besides STR?
I've only done STR testing, nuclear testing. In our lab, that's all we ever done.
That's all you've ever done?
Yeah, since I've been there.
Okay. So when there are mixtures or other people that have been ruled out, you only do one type of test, the STR?
Yes.
Is that the dominant test used these days?
Yes.
And when you say things like urine can wash away some DNA, that's just sort of hypothetical and possible?
Yes.
And the more the second contribution, the more you would expect to find a second contribution mixed with the, I suppose, the person whose vagina it is?
second contribution meaning,
Someone else's DNA.
can you rephrase the question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, you were asked about saliva on the vaginal area.
Mm-hmm.
And you were asked about whether urination can wipe that away, and wiping after urination can wipe that away, and you said it's possible.
That's correct.
Okay. And my question, just to follow that up, was the more of the contribution of saliva, the less likely it is that all would wash away.
Oh, that's possible, yes, that's fair.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Can you redirect?
Oh, yes, just briefly, Your Honor. Okay, first of all, you do not, as the forensic scientist, decide what swabs or what pieces of evidence are collected at a scene, correct?
No.
By the time you get involved in this process, is everything already collected and swabs taken?
Yes.
So let's say there's a crime scene with 45 places there has been blood found. Does the lab have a policy generally in how many items you guys are allowed to test, or would you do all 45?
No, we don't have the time, manpower to do all. It's called sample limits policy. Depending on the case, it depends on the number of items that would be requested and that we would be able to work.
Okay. Generally, that number can be as small as 3 to 5 items, is that right?
Yes, depending on the case.
Mr. Lieberman asked you some questions about, someone's saliva being able to be detected weeks after, or even days after, on a woman's vagina, and you said that would be possible if the woman was dead.
Yeah, it could be possible. It's possible. It's possible, I guess, yeah.
But if we have a live woman who's walking around, who's producing vaginal fluid, who's urinating, who's wiping her vagina, that's an incredibly low probability to be able to find that.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Is the probability low in general, without even urinating, without even wiping, that you would be able to receive DNA from the rub because of the richness of the woman's vaginal fluid?
That's true, yes.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Any further cross?
1 second, Your Honor, yes. With regard to that last line of questioning, the closer temporally between the collection of the sample and the contribution of the sample, the more likely you would be to find DNA, correct?
From like the incident to when the sex assault kit was collected?
Sure.
Yes.
And within 8 or so hours, you would certainly expect it would be more likely to find, you would be more likely to find DNA than, for example, 3 weeks later.
Yes, 8 hours would be better than 3 weeks later.
And I get that, 1 hour would be better than 8 hours, but 8 hours is still not a terribly long time for DNA.
No.
And so many times in your career, you've been able to determine DNA samples that have been collected much longer than 8 hours after a sexual assault, correct?
I would say that would be more with semen or sperm. That's mostly what we're working with. So I would say that's more true with those fluids.
All right, and that's, would that be collected from, you're talking about collected from inside the vagina?
Yes.
And those aren't washed away by vaginal fluids?
Sperm?
Yes.
No.
All right. There's some testimony earlier in this case about saliva being used on the vaginal area because of dryness. Would that play at all into your opinion about the amount of vaginal fluid that would be flowing to wash the saliva away?
I don't think I could answer that. I don't know.
Okay. If an area is dry, not secreting as much vaginal fluid, it's more likely that the contribution of saliva would still be there longer.
I guess it's possible.
We said there's a richness of vaginal fluid that washes saliva away.
It doesn't wash saliva, it masks DNA. So saliva or vaginal fluid is a rich source of DNA. So if I was to touch or the vaginal cavity, I would expect to have vaginal fluid mask that touch DNA. If that's what we're asking.
Okay. Yeah, it is, but
Okay.
saliva isn't touch DNA. It's rich mixture DNA, bodily fluid.
I would still say that vaginal fluid would be more prominent, most likely with saliva.
I understand more prominent, but you've been able, in this case at least, to determine two contributors.
For which sample?
Well, you say the blood samples, which are two different types of blood.
Oh.
You could certainly determine two different samples from a mixture of vaginal fluid and saliva, correct?
Yes, it's possible.
Thank you.
If I could have just a moment. Your
Sure.
Honor. Sorry for that, thank you. I don't have it, sir.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Next.
So we'll call Johnny Rockmore.
Okay, oh, sure. Sorry, we haven't had a long morning session for a while, so I forgot we would need a break. I apologize. During this recess, you are admonished not to